Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the North Central Region Conference for 2021. Thanks for joining us again. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce two fine fellows from CSI. You probably know them both, Thad and Casey. They've been with us for several conferences, and they do a great job talking about trusted advisors and how product reps make architects' jobs so much easier. So without any further comments, gentlemen, it's all yours.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Thad, are you ready to go?
I'm ready, my friend.
All right. Let's do a little self-introduction here. My name's Casey Robb. I've been with CSI over 35 years, and I've been in the North Central region for a long time as well. I've been to many of your conferences, and I really look forward to today's program. A little bit on my background. I started consulting with my own business in 2017. I help building product manufacturers, industry associations, and product reps all across the country with strategy, education, and training, and delivering new tactics on how to better engage and influence the design community for their particular products or services. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Thad, let him do a little self-introduction too.
Well, thank you, Casey. I appreciate it. And thank you, Steve and George and the rest of the North Central Region Conference for giving us a chance to be here and present today on a topic that's near and dear to both of our hearts. I am a primary member of the Columbus chapter, but I am also a member of the Chicago chapter, a proud member of the Chicago chapter. So I cover almost everything in the North Central region with my territory. I go from Rochester, New York, down through Nashville, Tennessee, out to Omaha, Nebraska, and my job is primarily to call on architects and give them the opportunity to work on better specifications for their gypsum products for sound and fire-related assemblies. I've been involved in CSI for a long time and happy to be here today, and I'll go on with that.
Today's learning objectives. We want to recognize the perceptions, limitations, and real value clients expect in a trusted relationship. We want to develop plans to move forward from vendor to trusted resource and gain a little bit more lasting credibility with the design community in the eyes of the client and the industry in which you serve. We're going to talk today, too, about this disrupted environment that we've been through as well. Thad and I've got some really special things for you in regards to that. We want to explore that relationship and those pitfalls and some strategies that can help you better understand the client's expectation and build on those solutions so that you serve the client better. And we want to identify how to embrace technology and become more efficient and more collaborative in mutually beneficial relationships. A lot of what we've done today is referenced on the 2018 Journey to Specifications that was done by the AIA, but there's also some great input from the Brevet Group as well. And those we will share with you some facts and figures that were actually done through surveys before COVID that I think still apply today. And a lot of that's going to circle around building those trusted relationships and how you do that better. It's also about customer perception, and the product rep, in their view, in the eyes of the architects, can often be misguided. A lot of us, I know Thad and I both take a lot of pride in the fact that we chose this career path. We help others successfully pull together projects and deliver projects in a much better way. And we've worked on this. We've done this for quite a number of years, and we don't plan on doing anything different anytime soon. This is a career path we've chosen, but oftentimes in the eyes of the architect, there's thousands of product reps trying to get a hold of them and trying to do business with them. And oftentimes they view sales reps from a unlikely perception. And that's kind of what this next slide gets at. What do the architects really think of product reps? Do they think we're just another vendor? Do they think we're out there golfing all the time or taking customers to lunch? Yeah, that's the perception. And these facts come from the Brevet Group. 89% of customers actually think we spend most of our time golfing, entertaining, and just merrily on our way. And they don't realize that we take this as a career path and we do things differently. 67% of product reps are remembered while the rest are simply forgotten. And I think that gets back to really knowing your strategy and knowing your products and knowing your limitations when you go talk to folks and building credibility as you go along the way. Responsiveness. This is an interesting fact. Only 36% of architects are happy with the response they get from product manufacturers. You think there might be an area where we can improve? perhaps this is one we should focus on. But this is all key and part and partial to building trusted relationships, and that's doing what you say, following up on what you promise, and delivering beyond expectations.
We all have a brand. You know, the car that we drive, the way that we look, the way we present ourselves, the things that we do, you know, the years we were born. Casey and I tend to drift towards the older side of the equation. You know, we've got some reps in my company that are nice and young and fresh faced, like I was 35 or more years ago, and they project a different type of atmosphere when they walk into the room. There are some good things and bad things for all of it. Some of the things that we can do, no matter what we look like, no matter who we are, is we make sure that we're on time. If for any reason, and I cover Chicago, and those of you in Chicago know that when you say you're going to be somewhere at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there's a little bit of forgiveness for that sometimes, depending on traffic. You know, it's not unusual to have somebody call and say, "Hey, I'm running a few minutes late. I'm just not going to get there. I got stuck on the Eisenhower or whatever." And so when you have those things, make the phone call. Do the best that you can to make sure that you communicate correctly. If you have somebody that's uninterested in your presentation, and I have that sometimes, I can tell that I'm just not hitting the mark for whatever reason, whether it's something going on in the firm, whether it's something going on in my delivery. There's times where I make presentations that I can tell that I'm just off the mark. I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not going to prolong that agony for the customer. I'm not going to prolong that agony for me. And it's not unusual in those extreme cases for me to say, I'll stop in mid-sentence and say, "You know what? This just isn't working for either one of us today. Would you mind if I reschedule? Can I give you back some time today?" It's amazing. It's amazing the response that you get when that happens. I've had heads bump up and go, "Really? You okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I just don't think we are. So I'd like to come back at another time when we can be better." It's amazing to see what happens when that goes on, and to see what your perception is the next time you're going to be in that office. So understand that trust is earned. It's not given. You need to do it every single day. You need to be your best every single day. I grew up in the drywall world. I was a contractor, and my father had a very good reputation. I had a very good reputation, but we both knew that we were about one bad job away from everybody talking nasty about us. So you have to earn your trust every day, every single job you do, every single interaction you have. You need to get out there and make the best of it. Casey, you got anything you want to add?
Absolutely. You brought up a great point about Chicago traffic. What did I do today? I was in Atlanta today. I'm based in the Southeast. I was concerned about making the program on time. So what did I do? I reached out to Thad and said, "Hey, I'm going to be there in plenty of time. I think it's going to work." But I would have done the same thing if I was going to be really, really tight. I try to communicate and let people know what's going on. I also really think it's important to take a look at the attitude that some reps bring into the table. And if you over exaggerate, if you don't deliver on the promises you've made in the simple process of just engaging, that's just, it's a tragedy, because that's where a lot of architects get their attitudes and perceptions on product reps. A thing I learned too a long time ago was, when you meet someone, you know that trust takes time, it's earned, but they're also evaluating you upon the initial encounter. When people meet you for the first time, whether it be virtual, whether it be in person, they're measuring you up. There's 10,000 receptors going off in the brain that know exactly what they consider and perceive. So make that a good perception. You know, come to the party dressed appropriately. Come to the engagement on time. Try to be there early. Try to communicate. All those basic principles really come into play when it comes to building trust.
This is a corporate study from 1992. So it's got some age to it, but it's also got some legs still under it. The focus of it was from a management team that basically got together and they said, "We see, no matter what business we're in, we have a set of problems that continue to crop up. So there's no such thing as a perfect project. There's no such thing as a perfect day. There's no such thing as a perfect sales call, or on either side, for the architect or for the product rep. So gathering some data, they sat down, they said, okay, when things go wrong, why don't they do it right? And so there were some basic things that came out, and I would encourage everyone on the call to ask yourself, when you get into these situations, to ask yourself these questions. Is it because it wasn't done right because somebody didn't know how to do it? It wasn't done right because maybe somebody didn't know what was expected of them. And that's what we talk about when we talk about getting certified, getting our CDT. When you walk into an architect's office, if you don't understand the basic way that the project is run, if you don't understand the basic functions of an architect's office and who you should be talking to, you don't even know what's expected of you. And you certainly know what to expect of the other person. Maybe if you've said something, but you didn't really have the authority to do it. And this is key, timely feedback. To be able to give someone feedback, one of the things the millennial generation has taught us is that they want constant feedback. It's not right. It's not enough to do a review once a year. They might want a review once a week because they want to kind of be gauged on how they're doing on a regular basis because information flows so much faster than it has in the past. So when you look down through the rest of this list, basically, a trusted advisor is someone where anytime these things pop up and they crop up, and they will, a trusted advisor basically is somebody who corrects them pretty quickly. Or for whatever reason, you have a call with someone and you go, wow, they knew exactly what I wanted. They had the exact thing on their hand that they wanted to see. I asked for this test and it came. It flows so easily, you might not even realize that you don't have a problem. And then when you do have one, you can get right to it and you don't mind asking a question. I've had younger reps that we've done some training with where there were so many things wrong that happened in the course of the call. I didn't even try to correct it while the call was going on. It's like, okay, we lost this one. We'll get back and we'll regroup, and I'll take them to the local coffee shop and we'll have a quick conversation and we'll kind of walk through, here's what we should have done. So always remember, failure is not fatal. Success is not final. No matter how good you do, you're always going to mess up occasionally and you can do better. Anything from you, Casey?
That's a great point. I call it fail forward fast, especially when you're young. I remember as a young product rep just getting started out, it was like, oh, how am I going to get specified? I just got to get specified. How's this going to work? And you go out you literally throw yourself on the doorstep and try to learn. You want to be curious. You want to be observant. You want to listen very carefully, but you also want to ask really good questions and gain feedback. Just gain small wins as you're into those conversations. And I think you got to have good work ethic. You got to have a really good ability to listen and learn and realize you're not going to know everything they want you to know, especially when you're young. Even when you get older, it's important to listen and learn and be mentored in both directions. So we'll talk about mentoring later, but I just think Thad brought up some really good points here around some of the don'ts that you can run into and some of the reasons you want to address those before you go on the call. This is one that a good friend of mine from Oklahoma taught me a long time ago. He says, why should I trust you? I've never tried your product. I'm not familiar with you. I don't know who you are. There's a lot of reasons why. And the reason is the architect and especially the specifier has over 10,000 products to consider when they're looking at a typical project, right? So a specifier has to be really intelligent around this multitude of options that are available, but not necessarily as deep with product knowledge and technical knowledge as you would expect in a particular category. So you're bringing that skill set and expertise from your set of skills and particular application, but you may be able to help them in other realms that they're trying to put this design concept together. So the initial call is just to get to know you and realize that you're not going to win. It may not fit the project. It may not fit the design, and you may not be a winner on that particular battlefield. But as you build trust, they start to like you because you do know what your category is including and what others can provide and be able to be more of a resource. So they start to get to like you, and eventually they start to trust you. And that trust takes time. It's earned. But when you do get to that point, you will see the reward in the project applications that you can help them successfully attain. I've often had architects tell me, don't tell me features and benefits. Don't tell me what your product's all about. Tell me how you can help me solve a particular problem. And this is what I'm running into. And they'll be glad to open up and talk to you about specific issues or problems or concepts they're looking at that they need to solve on this particular job. And realize you're not going to have a solution for every one of those jobs or every one of those opportunities. So you have to be able to listen and customize and deliver. And sometimes it involves others that may not even involve you. So realize that's the resource you can build on and become more of a trusted resource. Get to know you, like you, and trust you. It's a real cool process.
And I'll start and then I'll let you finish it up. But one of the things that we want to do is we want to create a culture of yes. But yes doesn't mean that you promise things that you can't deliver, okay? Find solutions that work and then treat people like a soul, not an object. When you're going to talk to someone and you're going to give them an opportunity to work with you, one of the things that I try to keep in the back of my mind is an architect puts his stamp on those plans and he's responsible for the life of that building. Regardless of what I'm doing, regardless of what happens with my sale or non-sale, regardless of what happens with the advice that I give them, if they know me, like me, and trust me, they'll be willing to put their name on the line, and that's what they do every single day. Casey?
I think this slide just says a lot, because what are most salespeople always doing? They're talking. They're not listening. They want to make promises that they can't always deliver on. Oh yeah, we got you covered. Oh yeah, we'll take care of that. The real key here, though, is to be subtle in your approach, to listen carefully, and under promise is probably the best strategy, because you can always over deliver. And that just goes right in hand with what we're trying to talk about here. Is 1 + 1 always doesn't always equal 2. So anyway, this is a key factor of building trust.
You know, one of the most important things you can do to build trust is to give your product away. Now, when I say give it away, I don't mean we're going to give everyone something for free, but there's oftentimes where I will recommend someone else's product because it's a better fit. I did a presentation about sound several years ago when I worked for another company to an architectural office, and I made a really good eye connection. And afterwards, the guy came up, said, "Man, I really liked what you said. I'm gonna remember you. I got my business card. It was awesome. One of those things that you really like." About a month later, he called and he says, "Hey, I want to use your project on this. I want to use your product on this project." And he started to describe it to me. And I said, "Man, that is fantastic that you thought of me. Thank you very much. But really, that's not the best application for my product." And I gave him a competitor's name, a product that was similar, but had some different features and benefits that fit his project better. And he goes, "Oh, that's great. Thank you very much." A couple months later, he calls me. He says, "I finally found a place I can use you. This is fantastic." And so we went through the process. And again, I listened to what he said. I asked the questions. Tell me about your situation. Again, we went down through the process, and it was actually a different product that would be better suited. And I said, "Look, appreciate you calling. Here we go." "Okay, fantastic. Thank you much." And off he goes. He called me one other time. Now he's a little more timid. He's a little more trepid. He goes, "I think I've got a place where I can use your product." And we started down that road. And I said, "You know what? There's a totally different product that I think you're trying to solve different solutions, because with sound, you have 3 or 4 different things you're channeling: IIC, STC, NRC." And I said, "You really got a better idea if we use this." And he got a little frustrated. He goes, "Well, you're not much of a salesman, are you?" And I said, "I beg your pardon?" And he goes, "Well, I've called you 3 times and you keep sending me somewhere else." Well, I gave him this Paul Harvey pregnant pause, and I said, "You're still calling me, aren't you?" And he said, "Well, yes, because I know you'll tell me the truth." And I said, "Okay."
There's your answer.
Now that we've established the trust that I want to establish, now that we know that we have a relationship where you can trust me, let me share with you the fact that I'm glad you heard me, but I don't think you heard some of the places my product could be used. Let's talk about some of this other work that you do where I think I'd be a better fit. And we have a great relationship. We're still using each other on a regular basis. He calls me when he has questions. I see him in I see their product, my product in their specifications all the time. So don't be scared to give away one job to get the next 100.
Good point, Thad. And don't be scared to use your experience from other career paths to use in the one that you've got now. I started out with a specialty coatings company that started in the concrete repair restoration side of things. Then I went to a sealant company that made high performance sealants. Then I went to a mechanically fastened building wrap manufacturer, an air barrier manufacturer. And when we started getting into more and more complicated building and closure components, it was really interesting to still hear common trusted resources out in the field. Well, trusted people that trusted me call me back and go, "Hey, didn't you sell sealants back in the day? I've got a sealant question. How can I get this answered?" I'll refer them on to the guys that I used to work with, or I'll take care of things like that. And I'll also share with others now that I'm in this position where they can get answers. And that really opens up the dialogue to a much deeper conversation, ones where people will call you again and again and again. So Thad, your story was spot on.
Yeah, and I'll share another one. I left the business for about 18 months and I went to a door company. I got out of the gypsum business, went to a door company. Well, you talk about a fish out of water. You don't want dumb drywall guys to be out selling doors. A fire door company, so it was still in the space. And so I got a call once from an architect, a good architectural friend of mine, a specifier at a large firm, and he goes, "Hey, this is so and so, and I know you're not in the gypsum business anymore, but I've got a question I'd like to ask you." And he had a relatively new product at the time that he was getting different conversations from different reps. He was getting conflicting stories. And he called me, even though I wasn't in the business anymore, because he wanted to hear the truth and he wanted my opinion of what these products could do. That was one of the most flattering moments of my career. I was shocked that he would still remember me. I was shocked that he would make that phone call. And I was thrilled to death that he had that kind of trust in me, that he would give me the opportunity to evaluate something that he knew that I would get nothing out of. He felt comfortable enough to call me knowing I would get nothing out of it. There was no opportunity for sales for me from a perspective. So that's the kind of thing. When you build that kind of trust, those of you that are product reps sitting out there in the audience, you've won.
What do architects really want from product reps? And this was right out of the study from that 2018 AIA survey of about 2,500 architects on what they expect out of product reps. They really want a partner that they can count on. They really value a strong relationship with those representatives they can trust. That's an important point. They want a consultative approach. They want an architect who really appreciates the trusted advisor strategy. They want reps who know the product category in and out. They want reps who understand the competitive sets that are out there that they're basically competing with, but they also want someone who understands the supply chain, the issues that are in the relationship of getting the product in the project and in the scheme of things. And they want someone who understands specifications. And I think that's where CSI can really help with their CDT program, the CCPR program, actually sitting down with an architect or specifier that you get to know and understand what their trials and tribulations are when they try to cipher through the multitude of sources where they can get information and actually put it into a written document and make it work. So understanding the rules of engagement, understanding the three-part spec, master format, where you belong, where things like that work, how alternates, substitutions, how allowances and unit prices, how all those things work is really, really key in your ability to fill that role as a trusted advisor.
Now, so far in this program, everything that we've talked about would have worked prior to last year. And everything that we've talked about is still true today. So understand that what we've talked about are truisms. These are axioms that will last forever. They happened last year, they happened the year before, and they'll be relevant next year. But lo and behold, in March of 2020, we made some big changes.
Yeah, we did. Where'd my day timer go?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You talk about a total disruption where we turned our entire world upside down. So let's just talk real quickly about what happened. The world basically stopped as we know it. The NBA games were canceled the 11th, March 11th of last year. And by the 13th of last year, most schools and buildings had shut down. And by the 16th, there were governors issuing mandates basically to say, do not leave your house. So the first 30 days, what happened? Well, for those of us in the industry, I will tell you, I'll give you a quick story. On the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th. On the 16th, I had scheduled a box lunch in Indianapolis, Indiana. And the 17th, 18th, and 19th, I had 3 different presentations scheduled in Chicago. So I had a long week ahead of me, leaving Ohio first thing in the morning. On Monday morning, wouldn't be back till Friday afternoon. On the morning of the 13th, we had a conference call. Actually, it happened at noon with my team. And there was conversation about, are you leaving? Should you travel? Should you not travel? We had permission to travel if we had called the customer and made sure that they were okay. During that call between 12 and 1, I had 2 of those firms call and cancel for the following week. And by the end of the day, all of those were gone. Now, I learned something, and we'll talk here a little about being a trusted advisor. One of the things that I did was I gathered as much information as I could. For the people that called me that wanted to cancel, I offered some different things. I offered a virtual platform and was told several different things. We don't use that platform. Well, I'm not sure we could do that. I'm not, there was a lot of conversation about what was going to happen. I made notes, copious notes on everything everybody said, and I put together a template to be able to answer most of those questions with my next proactive calls. And I lost those 4 lunches, but I kept every other one I had scheduled for the rest of the year and continued to do more. So we all scrambled in that first 30 days. And it took about 2 weeks, and every rep in the country, it seems like, that had an opportunity for a virtual presentation started to market to the bigger firms. And I'm sure all of you sitting there in the audience that are architects went, I get 8 or 10 of these. I've heard from one particular one that's probably out there today. I get 8 or 10 of these a day. Why should I see you? So it took about 30 days for us to all scramble around and get our story straight. It took about 60 days to figure out how to implement it and how to make the right calls. And in 90 days, we were talking about having some openings, maybe some in the Great Lakes. We had a virtual conference that we had scheduled, or we had a regular face-to-face conference we had scheduled for the end of March. We pushed it to August thinking we'd do it in person. That's how optimistic we were. So we sit down and we talk about, okay, after this time, now that we've got a year's worth of time to look back, 15 months to look back, what's the next normal? Not the new normal, but what's the next normal? Casey?
I appreciate that perspective, Thad. I mean, I had a very similar experience. I used to keep a day planner that was copious notes, that was 6 months out. It was amazing. That was my lifeblood. That was my organizer. And I'll tell you what, when March hit, I literally had to throw the thing away, and I thought the world was going to collapse. But I think most firms did too, because they had to pull back. They had to learn how to go virtual. They were scrambling to figure out what they were going to do for their business. And I think we took a little bit of a pause in March and April. But as those meetings started to go virtual, you saw a multitude of different environments. And I think most of us were capable of doing virtual because of CSI Next and some of the webcasts that we'd been involved with. But I don't know how many of you've ever done a national webcast as like a corporate partner, but they're very awkward because you have no audience, you have no feedback. It's really, really hard to do. And if you're not used to it, you fall flat on your face. I'll give you an example of what happened on TV, and that is your late night show host like Jimmy Kimmel and Fallon and Colbert and all these others. You watch them try to go from live audience to virtual, and some of them did very, very well. Some of them fell flat on their face. And I think we, as product manufacturers and reps, we had to figure out how we were going to do this engagement and do it differently. I'll give you an example. Like Jimmy Kimmel's one of my favorite examples because he came from the radio business. The radio business has no audience. You have a mic and you're talking to the world, and you really don't know what that feedback's like. So he was used to that, and I'm sure Howard Stern would have done great through a Zoom call because he's entertaining. He knows what his audience expects, and he delivers a little bit different message when he's virtual versus live audience. So the ones that couldn't, though, oh my gosh, it was almost painful to watch Fallon from his basement, right? So I compare that to what we're seeing today with manufacturers changing it up. And as of I'll call April of last year, people were thinking, some of my customers were thinking in high gear how to take virtual engagements and make them more engaging, like doing hands-on training with participants in the audience. I have one manufacturer I work with that has turned this into a smash up event where you get your AIA credits for the first half of the session, and then you do a little hands-on session afterwards. And you, as a participant, you have to turn your camera on and be judged with your participation. So it is really amazing how some have changed the game. I work with another manufacturer who set up an academy environment and brought in 900 people at a time for a building science expert to come in and talk to them on a different level, on a building science level. And those engagements were very entertaining as well. But my point to you in the audience, if you're a product rep trying to continue to build credibility, change it up and be able to deliver a virtual session that causes them to turn the camera on, not turn it off and multitask and do something else, because you got to keep them engaged. And I think as we come out of this next normal, we're going to see a bit of a combination. We're going to see some live streaming of lunch and learns. If you get to go downtown Atlanta and go do a lunch and learn with an office, they're going to be 6 feet apart. There's going to be about 4 people in the room, and you're going to be live streamed to a number of others out there in the environment. I've seen it happen in Nashville recently. I saw it happen in Atlanta with a couple of calls on a project opportunity. You'll have 2 or 3 in the conference room. Everybody will have masks on. They'll be separated, but you'll be live streamed to the audience that needs to hear it. And if you're not getting those kinds of engagements, I encourage you to ask for them, because they're out there and they're happening, and people are busier than they've ever been right now. That's the problem in itself, because getting a response is oftentimes difficult. But thank goodness for Thad and I, we've got a network. We've got a little bit of trust out there with people that we've built over the years. I do feel sorry for a young professional at this point in their career. It can get a little bit stifling, but continue to practice the process that we're talking about here. Continue to feed your network. Continue to feed them information that will help them be more successful.
Hey guys, we got a quick comment here. James Bergevin said, "Excellent point on audience feedback. I use a second person counterpart chat reader to get interaction with people, sort of like what we're doing right now."
Yeah, and that's a great point. And that's part of this future conversation, was how we help each other out and how we make each other more effective. And Casey brings up a great point. I was president last year of the CSI Next chapter, and one of our main goals pre-COVID was to be able to get the presenter on and do a practice run prior to our monthly meeting. And here's why. You're used to walking around the room and you're used to having a conversation when you're talking to somebody. And if you're in the middle of a sentence and you do a pregnant pause, when you're live, everybody can still see you and they see you moving around, and there's no interaction or interruption. They can have that eye contact. If you do that on a live stream and you let it go for 4 or 5 seconds, that's an eternity, and they think maybe they got disconnected. So the rules are totally different. The engagement is totally different. And so what happens is we would have person after person after person that was scared they wouldn't get through their presentation when we started. And 38 minutes later or 32 minutes later, they've done an hour-long presentation because they don't have that audience feedback. So how do you replicate that in your room? How do you replicate that in your office or your living room? Well, there's some tips and tricks. And I will tell you that one of the first things that I did, that our company did as a pivot, was AIA did a whole platform, a series of platforms on presentations on doing a virtual presentation, what the requirements were from a legal standpoint to meet AIA requirements, as well as some of the tips and tricks from people that have been doing it for years. And so something as simple as, when I talk to you folks, my grandchildren are on the other side of this screen. So when I present, I'm actually talking to my grandkids. So there's a face that I can put with the screen. And of course, I know many of you, so I can think of some of you in the room out there as well. When I hear Steve or George's voice, I feel comfortable anyway. By the same token, it's not unusual, depending on the presentation. There are times that I stand. Now, I have to make sure I don't move too much, but there are times where I stand where I feel more natural and I can move my body like I normally would when I'm making a presentation. So find those tips and tricks that work for you. Find those things that make you feel more comfortable. Be willing to have that pregnant pause and not feel like you're rushed to get back to the screen because somebody might turn you off. It's important for us to teach other people by the same token. We have a series of, in our company, we have a series of presenters like myself, and then we have a series of field reps that do occasional architectural presentations. One of the first things we did was we got them on the phone and we started to work with them. So when they were out with the, I'll do 80 presentations a year. They'll do 10. So for them to have the opportunity to do something virtually in front of us, their peers, the people that know more than they do, because we're the technical marketing folks, that was very intimidating for them. But it was an exercise we forced them to go through because we wanted to give them a hand and help make them more effective, not just for themselves, but as a trusted advisor, I'm thinking about the poor architects that have to sit in a room and listen to them talk like that. So it makes a big difference.
Absolutely correct, Thad. And I'll share a story with you. Several years ago, when I was working at DuPont, we had 3 new AIA programs come out, and all the commercial managers had to meet in Richmond at the plant and deliver those to our leadership, kind of like what you're talking about. And when we got there, the assignment changed. We're all prepared to do an hour-long presentation. The assignment changed on the spot, and the leadership team said, okay, I'm the architect. I'm the principal of the firm. I just came into the room and I told you, hey, look, we got a project deadline up. I've only got 15 minutes. I don't have an hour. Tell me what your program's all about and tell me why I should be here. And we all had to adjust on the fly and deliver that kind of a program. It was a really key learning for me. I'd seen this happen in my early days where the light bulb goes out of the slide screen projector, right? And you're stuck. You don't have a replacement. So you gotta improvise, right? So that's the kind of preparation you need to have for these kind of programs. The same thing is true for virtual. You got to be able to step into the spotlight, be able to summarize quickly, but to engage your audience and get them to open up and share at the same time. And that's a really tough conversation to have on a Zoom environment or a Teams environment, as you well know. Practice makes perfect in this world, and this one takes some special practice to deliver a little more compelling story and reason they should talk to you. Do your homework. It's really important.
Casey, it's interesting that you say that about the time difference in preparation as opposed to presentation, because I had that very same conversation with an architect just last week who they went to make a presentation to their client, and that client gave them the same scenario. So it happens in all walks of life, and it was important for them to be prepared and be able to narrow that down to several key points in order to try to help them get that particular project. So as we think about being a trusted advisor, and we talk about it like it's some mystic thing, but it's really a series of small steps that you take in an organized fashion to build the trust that you need to build. So what does it look like when you want to migrate to the top? Well, you need to be able to make some traditional moves as well as some adjustments to stay relevant. And some of the traditional, Casey, you want to go through. I know you do a really good job on this first column.
What's changed? Yeah. Nobody wants to be sold. They all want to have the ability to hear what you've got to say, but at the appropriate time. So you have to ask some very interesting open-ended questions to find out what particular problems or solutions they're looking for. I call it, what do they need to fix, accomplish, or avoid? But I tell you what, if you can figure out what the client's trying to accomplish, what the client's problems are, the considerations they have, and listen while they explain that before you try to respond, it'll make a much more engaging conversation, and it'll show that you care, and it'll show that you really do want to help support them in solving their problems. You're not there just for you, you're there for them. Architects really, they want to be advised, and they're looking to solve problems and really gain trust. So this strategy really works in particular when we didn't have this disruption, but it's valuable now, and it's much more important now because everyone's so short on time. They have been compressed into so much more that this coming out of the expectation today. What's next, Thad? How are you taking it?
Well, it's interesting. You touched on it earlier. Those of us with the gray hair, or in my case, the white hair, gray is long gone in my case. Uh, you know, those of us with contacts and years and years and years of people who have reached out to us really have an advantage in this particular marketplace. So I'll share a little bit about why it's different for us, and then I'll speak a little bit to the younger rep and give them the opportunity to get to that point. And we talked a little bit about some of the things earlier where we talked about be willing to tell the truth, be willing to recommend your competition, be willing to be a solution seller, not a sales seller. There's a difference. And one of the best things that you can do that is you need to listen with the intent to listen. Let me say that again because it's very important. Listen with the intent to listen. We've all been in conversation with somebody where we were barely done speaking the sentence we did, and they had diarrhea of the mouth and they went off with an answer that they thought we wanted to hear, or they thought they understood what we said, but they missed two key words in that sentence, and they answered a question that was totally different than what we asked. So be willing to take a step back, especially in today's society, especially when you're over the phone where you don't have the verbal cues to be able to build that. There's people that I just naturally like the way they look, and they like the way I look, and they like the way we dress, or we have something in common. And you have these commonalities that you have from visual interactions that mean that you get a different relationship with somebody than you can over the phone. Whether you have a pleasing voice or not, that can make a difference. Whether you have, I tend to have a Southern twang to my voice, even though I'm from from Ohio. I tend to talk a lot more Southern than I am. There are times where I talk to somebody from the North or the Northeast, and they're like, "You sound like a hick." Well, yeah, I am. Okay. So you need to have empathy with the fact that their tools are just as hampered as our tools are. Listen with the intent to listen, and then provide the solution. And Casey brought up a good point earlier. People don't have the time they had before. So you need to be quicker to get to the results. We're not going to have a conversation about the football game. We're not going to have the banter that we normally have sometimes while we're waiting around for other people to come into the room. When somebody calls you, they need to have the answer and they want to have it right now.
Well, I was going to get back to that empathy point because of the disruption, because of what COVID-19 has done to us all around the world. It's a different conversation now. People have been through some really tough times. They've been through some disruption. And for you architects and specifiers out there, there's a lot of product reps out there that have been through a lot of disruption too. They've been furloughed, they've been deferred, they've been cut back, they've been through a lot. So everyone on both sides of the equation has to have a little bit more empathetic approach. And I really want to play on that because empathy is a key part of building trust and conversation and getting the ball rolling again.
That speaks to that last point. Do unto others as you would have done to you. Mm-hmm. If you deliver more than you cost, you'll always have work. You'll always be busy. If you can give somebody something they didn't even know they needed, and sometimes that's the case. There's times where someone will call and say, "Here's what I think. Here's what I need, and tell me about the situation." "Oh no, wait a minute. You probably need this, this, and this." If you can deliver more than you cost, you'll always have work.
This one really gets down to the virtual learners out there and how difficult that is. And when you do these presentations, the rules are somewhat similar to a normal presentation, but you really want to avoid the rep just trying to BS a person. You want to make sure that you understand the product, you understand the needs, and you really want to avoid just reading slides and putting your audience to the death by PowerPoint ritual. That unfortunately that used to happen quite a bit, and I didn't think it did anymore. I thought we were over that, but I've had architects pull me aside, young principal architects pull me aside and go, "Casey, do you think you could come in and do a lunch and learn for us?" This was before COVID. And I'd look at him and go, "Well, sure. What's wrong?" He goes, "My young professionals in this office don't get a chance to see good presentations very often." I go, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "You just wouldn't believe the number of people that come in here with a nonchalant PowerPoint slideshow that just read to me. I can read all day long. It's not the reading the slides that matters. What matters is the story you tell and the story you share on how you helped another individual solve a problem. And the storytelling is what really lasts.
You're exactly right. If you have something visually appealing, if you have something you can send out, a virtual learning kit, is there something you can send ahead that, especially if you're in that design, that interior design space where you're so key on visuals, is there something you can send ahead that they can touch and feel and you can share together on the screen, even if one of you is holding it and the other one can hold the same thing in another room? So find an engaging opening, find a way to have a conversational tone. Hopefully today, if nothing else, you found out that Casey and I are comfortable in front of the screen and we can give a conversational tone and we can share some of these stories, and hopefully some of them are humorous and you'll remember some of them, because like Casey says, people tend to remember the stories. They'll remember some sort of a reference that you made, something that ties in with them. And again, virtual learning kit, Casey, you had an example on this one.
Yeah, fortunately, I was working with a client back in the March timeframe of last year that went through this massive disruption, like we all did, and they were accustomed to bringing 50 to 100 people into their location facility and doing a hands-on mock-up that was just incredible. And what they tried to do was convert this into a small mini mock-up that was literally put into a box form, mailed to the customer 30 days in advance. And while they proceeded to do an AIA accredited CEU to introduce them to the category, they actually had a box at their desk where they could unfold, pull out pieces and parts, and participate in a hands-on training session that really engaged the audience. And what it also does is it engages a design professional into workmanship issues and means and methods that they try like heck to avoid, right? But they really need to understand how things and products and systems come together. And that's where the real critical details come into play. So this manufacturer started this in about May of last year, and they're almost to 1,000 participants now 1 year later. And the funny thing, I think the really cool thing, is this is now playing into this virtual office setting to where I can go in now and offer this same kind of hands-on methodology to a few people in the office, and that'll still get live streamed out to either their members of their firm, consultants to their firm, or customers of their firm. So if I'm working for a big university and they've got an architect that runs the whole university, wouldn't that be cool if I was an architect, I could bring them into my hands-on virtual training and say, this is what we're considering on your next job. It's so cool how you can bring all these parties together and get a bigger collaboration going than just a traditional AIA CEU lunch and learn. I mean, I think this kind of innovation is where the industry is heading, and it's very fun, very exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, guys, couple quick questions for you. One was Alan Iskowitz says the hands-on training that Casey is talking about was a great experience for the design professionals. I have to concur. I've partaken in 2 of them, and they're great. Science heavy at the beginning, and then the hands-on is just fantastic. The other one was Ron Ray asked if you could back up to the 2018 AIA specification survey again so that you can see it.
Yeah.
On the slide.
Well, tell Ron I'll be glad to send that to him if he'd like to see it.
All right. You just did.
Well, it's funny that you should mention that, because our next slide is this. 5% of people remember statistics. So please ask Ron to dictate those 4 different sets of statistics from that slide. I'm sure it can happen. 63% of people remember stories. So we're 20 slides into this presentation. What was on slide 8? Okay. Do you remember the story about the fellow from Sound that I told you that he called me 3 different times before we finally found the point where we gained our trust? So people remember stories. So when you're giving a presentation, you can give all the statistics you want. You can sit on that slide as long as you want. It's kind of like watching the weather at night. My wife and I will sit down and we'll watch the TV and we'll watch the weather. And an hour later, she'll say, "What's it going to be like tomorrow?" Because we're just mindlessly watching TV and we forget. So understand that when you follow up with someone, when you give these presentations, hopefully, even though most of these are copyrighted, hopefully you can release a PDF, or you're willing to follow up with some sort of statistical information that you sent them after the fact. When I do a virtual lunch and learn, I have started to have a series of follow-up emails that go out to those people that were on the call. And again, some of this is out of necessity because I'm not 100% sure that everyone on the audience is as engaged as I would hope they would be. So I want to give them the opportunity to receive that information more than one time, just in case that they had a phone call from their school, one of their children in their school, they were doing virtual learning somewhere else and the computer crashed, whatever it was, you want to be able to give your audience the opportunity to be followed up with. So Casey and I will make this presentation available via PDF after it's over. I would recommend that any rep that has that at least offer it during the presentation, or at least clip out 2 or 3 key slides. We have a particular presentation that has some sound cost slides that are unusual in the marketplace. They're not readily available anywhere else. And so it's not unusual for me to clip them out just as a follow-up to say, hey, we talked about several different options here. And just as a reminder of here's what the RS means people say they are, you might want to compare these in your market to give people a chance to remember. So honesty is important. Storytelling is important. You don't want to be the monkey in the room. Casey?
Well, I just want to comment to all the chat going on right now about statistics. These are based on actual statistics from the Brevet Group and the AIA Architects Journey to Specifications. These are out of the written documents, so I hope you will agree that they are vital. I'll tell you what, the Brevet Group has some really cool information, and I don't get to all of it in this presentation, but I do share a little bit more in the how Welcome to the Vendor Jungle has a few more of the statistics that I share, and it's very interesting. It really spells out some of the missing links that we as product reps often misuse and misunderstand. So I think it's been pretty fascinating to see what the information shares. But no, I think virtual learning itself is a much better opportunity to share a story than statistics, and follow up is key to sharing the real information, the technical data, and the stats that you want to get across and help people learn from those stats.
So what does it look like in 2019 and in COVID-19 world to 2021? We talked about listening with the intent to listen, but it's important about that to use your virtual voice if you need to make proactive calls, and we all do, to outreach to people, we need to be prepared. And again, this goes back to what Casey and I were saying earlier, is there's not a lot of time for small talk. You need to get right to the point. You're not going to have those visual cues and that interaction. So you need to have a more direct conversation. It's important to make sure that you follow up correctly and you listen to what's going on. You need to make sure that the conversation happens at the time when you have somebody call you proactively. You don't always know what their situation is. It's different if you can be in the office, and we don't always know what's going on the other side of the wall, but we can tell by their visual cues if somebody's in a rush or they seem to be frustrated. That's harder to tell on the telephone. So understand that you need to find the need behind the need and anticipate what I call react proactively to design problems. A good example is this. Because I've been in this industry a long time, I get a lot of proactive phone calls. I don't have to do a lot of proactive outreach to keep my days full. I have certain target firms that I want to make sure that I stay in touch with, but I have a plethora of calls that come in, more so than I've ever had in my life. As I talked about, my territory is rather large, and I spend a lot of time traveling. So I'll spend hours at a time where I don't talk to anybody because I'm on a plane, or I'm driving from one place to the other, listening to a webinar or some sort of a training tape or something like that. And so the phone just doesn't ring. Since March of last year, my phone has been crazy. And here's my theory on that. Let's talk about someone we all know and love, an icon of the North Central Region Conference, or Sheldon Wolf. Sheldon's retired now, but the architectural curmudgeon, I mean, he calls himself that. Think about him when he was in his office. You got all these young architects, you got 50 young architects that all have maybe a question that they want to go to the corner office. They want to go to Mecca to find out from Sheldon what's going on. And maybe they're busy and they tried to dial his extension and he sees the phone ring and he's like, I don't have time for this. I'm busy. I'm doing something important. He was hard to get a hold of when he was in the office sometimes, but they could pick themselves up. They could walk to the other side of the office. They could stand in front of his office and they could get his attention. That opportunity is gone. Those young reps that are looking for mentorship and they're looking for the resources that they didn't even know they used every day in that office, they're gone. So now we get calls, they're sitting there working on a project. They need a fire rated assembly of some kind. They have no idea where to look for it. They've called that guy that they used to have to go see. He's not answering the phone. He didn't answer his phone when he was in his office. So they can't get a hold of the right guy. So they're calling reps in a frenzy going, I need this right now because I have a deadline, or I need this right now because I've got an RFI I have so long to respond to, or I need this right now because I'm trying to complete this set of plans for a deadline. So understand that we're getting calls, some of us, some of this older guard, we're getting calls that we never used to get that are relatively simple. But it's important to make sure that we're available. It's important to make sure that we give the right answer. It's important to make sure that we do it in the right amount of frame time and time frame so that we can get these people back to work and give them the answers that they need. And so some of us, and if you're in that category, even if you're a young rep and you've got somebody that calls you, don't try to make small talk. Answer their question, get off the phone. You can send a follow-up email afterwards. You can do whatever you need to, but react proactively and solve their design problems. CEUs should be the same way. They should, if you've not looked over your CEU for a while and a lot of it had some fluff in it, you need to do your best to work with your marketing department and your technical department and get all that out there and try to deliver the best that you can and look at it with a critical eye and say, okay, does this make sense in a virtual world like it did when I could be there and talk, show a sample, or do something else? Casey, you have anything you want to add here?
Well, I think we saw a different type of disruption with COVID. And now that we're starting to emerge from that, we're starting to see a new kind of disruption. And the disruption that we're seeing now is around price and availability and quantity and just all the things that happened this spring. And I think that's going to continue to be a real challenge. And architects sometimes design projects and see things happening from their perspective and don't realize that when it comes time to do CA and execute, there's going to be some ripple effect from what's going on right now. I'm getting more calls now because of that ripple effect than I am about the other things that you'd like to hear. So it's a really interesting time. And I think this year is going to continue to be a disrupted time that we have to be very careful to listen, to prepare, and to be able to help solve new problems that are going to start coming out of the woodwork around quantity, delivery, and execution of the project.
One of the nicest things that was ever said to me by one of my counterparts was, he said, Thad, one of the things that I like about you is you have the ability to listen without judgment. And I said, what does that mean? And he says, a lot of people listen with the intent to respond, or listen with the intent to pass their own judgment on what a pre-designed idea of what's going to happen or what they think should happen. You have the ability to listen and evaluate both sides of the equation and have the opportunity to give the best possible solution. And that's why people are drawn to you in certain situations. And in today's world where we're so divided with black and white and red and blue and all the things that are going on in this world, to be able to talk to another human being and listen without judgment and to be able to have an open mind is probably one of the most important things. So if you're a young rep out there and you have some very staunch opinions that may or may not be valid 20 years from now, please trust me on this. It may or may not be important 20 years from now as it is right now. Make sure that you do your best to listen without judgment. So let's say you're a new rep today and you don't have a tremendous following. You don't have years in the audience. You don't have all the gray and white hair that you're seeing on the screen today. So how do we use some of today's tools to move forward? And I would tell you that social media is probably more important than it's ever been, more valuable than ever. Casey has some stories here about some ways that we can meet with people.
Well, I do. And this comes from being mentored in both directions. A young professional I met at one of my first North Central Region conferences, we were looking for input from young professionals and what we could do differently at CSI. And I really hit it off with this young man. He was from St. Louis. That's where I'm from originally. And when we got together at this conference, we kind of bonded over that connection. And it was kind of funny. He was the young professional on one side of the aisle, and the old specifier, like Sheldon, this wasn't Sheldon, but the older specifier was on the other side of the aisle. So they were throwing darts at each other all the time about this next engagement, this next generation, and what they're looking for. And having that credibility that built, 30 years ago by knowing this design professional, this specifier, kind of related with this young man. So as we got to know each other, we got to learn from each other. He started sharing with me his aspirations to get outside the business and go into the data management side of things. And he actually moved to Georgia, and we got together down here before COVID. And he started to tell me things about his selling experience that were actually different than what I had ever heard before. And he was using social media and LinkedIn and other things in a much different way. And one of the things he was doing, rather than waiting on the phone call or the email to respond to an initial request for a meeting, he was using LinkedIn to throw out, can I get 15 minutes of your time on your schedule connected to my schedule through Calendly, and I'll make an appointment to have a conversation based on your time, not on my time. And he said, I get an 80% response to that first request for just 15 minutes to talk. And then he basically has the conversation and helps them understand what he does. He listens to understand what they need. And then he'll bring in other resources from his company to deliver on that. And his success rate at getting to that second meeting is almost 80% as well. So it really taught me, by listening to this next generation, how they want to engage and how they want to be, participate on their terms, not on our terms, was a real key learning for me. And having that ability to be mentored in both directions is really key to stay relevant in the world that we're operating in right now. So I challenge you all to take a real close look at the social aspect of marketing, the YouTube, the things that are going on. I've had before COVID hit, I had a manufacturer, a branding company, actually tell me that the interaction with the physical interaction with reps is going to change dramatically. That understanding that journey from the digital world and to the conversation happening is going to be very, very important as we emerge and get into this next normal. So you have to have a digital presence. You have to have a great journey through the digital process to get to information. And you need to really shore up that if it's a weak link. So if you're asking people to register before they can see, forget that strategy. You got to be willing to share information openly and freely and get people to engage with you much quicker than you've had to do in the past. And that will lead to better results down the road.
Another great tip, we talked about it earlier, the difference between being in person, being in the room with someone. Oftentimes when we give presentations, we have things we hold up. We have things that we show, things that we pass around that people can touch and feel. If you can't do that advanced virtual learning kit that we talked about earlier, which is laborious and not every product is actually right for that. Something as simple as a YouTube video for installation is good for my particular business. Everybody knows what a piece of drywall looks like, but not everybody understands how a shaft wall system goes together. So a quick video, a YouTube video on that, something you couldn't bring into the office anyway. So use those tools. If your LinkedIn gives you a tremendous way to get yourself out there and just put short articles on there, there's blogs you can contribute to. There's things you can put on the comments in the CSI communities. If you want to write, if you're better at writing and you've got longer things to say, articles, trade magazines, and blogs are always looking for content. Trust me on that one. They really are.
One of the companies I'm working with now actually has a young professional in the Southwest who actually is a transferee from Germany, came into the country through Canada. Now he's out there, and his story around engaging with architects was just amazing, because he didn't know the rules of engagement. He didn't understand, but he was so curious and so tenacious at continuing the journey. He now has a following on LinkedIn and on YouTube of every project he visits. He'll go back and he'll pull back the curtain, and start showing all the different problems that happen and how they handled them and how they brought solutions to the table. So he has this following now, and it's just amazing the level of interaction he's gained by taking his little camera along with him and posting stuff and getting people to engage visually. It's an amazing story.
One of the other things that's important for us all to remember is it pays to be persistent. And these particular statistics, and we'll share these, Ron, as well, these statistics don't change post-COVID or pre-COVID, okay? Whether you've made an initial contact over the phone or in person, that's not the end of it. It's kind of like virtual presentations. It's like lunch and learns in general. A lunch and learn is not the end of the relationship. It's the beginning of the relationship. And so we have some folks that over the years that I've worked with that have gone out and, I did a lunch and learn there 8 years ago, and they haven't been back since, and they think they have a relationship. That is not a relationship. It's kind of like the first date. You get to know each other. They get to see you stand in front of the room and be a subject matter expert. You can do that well or not, but that's just the first step. Then trying to follow up afterwards. And then this one that's highlighted is really important. Call somebody back. I had an interesting discussion the other day. For my particular company, if you go to our website, you can find 5 people with a face and a phone number, and I'm one of those 5. You can't find you can't find somebody to call in the sales department. You can't find somebody to call in the HR department. But technical marketing, we're there, and so we get all kinds of calls. We get all kinds of emails on a regular basis. Somebody wants to. A Boy Scout troop wants you to donate a few sheets of something to somebody. We get that information because they can find us. I am very diligent about getting back to all those people. And because the very first person that I called back said, I can't believe I got a phone call. I've sent stuff to manufacturers' websites for years, and I can count on one hand the people that actually responded. You called me back within 5 minutes and you're willing to help me. You've got the business. So realize that 40% of sales go to the rep that responds first. So just do your job. In the immortal words of Bill Belichick, just do your job. Call somebody back. And I'm sorry I've got passionate about that. I don't mean to be accusatory towards anybody. Hopefully I've got a room full of people that do, and this is all falling on deaf ears because they know it. But if there's somebody out there that doesn't, please understand. That's all it takes sometimes. Be a warm body in the room. Casey, you and I are part of the EIEIO club. We can talk forever about this particular slide, but I'll let you start.
Well, I took the CDT in 1989, and I went to a study class at the head specifier of a firm in St. Louis. His wife was the administrator, and she had us all over to her house. There was like a dozen of us sitting at her dining room table for 8 weeks on a Monday night. Every 8 weeks we were there, and we were quizzing each other on this darn thing called CDT. And when we finally took the test, it was like, oh my gosh, this is tough. There's no easy answer here. So fortunately, I got the chance to pass it. And then I got really excited about it because it showed me that not only can you learn the rules of engagement for construction, a typical construction project, it helps you become more of a resource. And you'd be surprised at how many design professionals are out there that don't really understand the process and how it really works. So you can become an advisor to them. You have to use it carefully, but you can do some pretty good things. And you can also have a credible conversation with senior level people in the firm and know that you know what you're talking about. Now, that has changed over the years. The project delivery schemes have gotten a whole lot more complicated today than they ever were before. But the basic building blocks of these certifications really do help a person understand how to position oneself in the equation. I will say today, The design decisions are happening much earlier in the process. So don't be timid about getting involved early. Don't be afraid that if you're involved, you don't necessarily have a chance when the first set of design development 50% DD stage comes out and you're not in it, because there's still an opportunity there to become a part of the project. And know this, that if you are too late and the contract's already bid and the job's already out there, there's always an opportunity to have a conversation if you have developed that trust and credibility to where things could come together. This is all part of it. The certification process really helps. It not only helps product reps, but it helps design professionals. It helps certified specifiers every day. I won't talk to that because I've never taken it, but I understand it's very important. And I also understand contract administration because I used to have to do that as well. Before I became a product rep, I was in contract administration. And it's very difficult to understand how all these things have to come into play when you're executing a construction contract. And then I'll talk last but not least about CCPR. Back when I was president of the organization in 2012, president-elect, the CCPR was almost killed because 44 people took it that year and only 2 people passed. And what we found out was the body of knowledge really didn't line up with the content in the guide and the product rep practice guide. And we've taken years to re-involve and re-engage this thing. And now 2022, spring of 2022, you will be able to take the CCPR once again and have a much higher likelihood of passing based on the study materials, the body of knowledge, and the way things will line up. So that's been a journey itself, but I think it brings a lot of credibility to the product rep as well. The thing it did for me, the first year they offered it, it allowed me to sit in the chair with the specifier, literally next to him, and go, wow, you have to do all this to get from product information to a project manual into a construction project. This is just fascinating. And it also helped me understand the 3-part specification better. It helped me understand the warranties, the implications of allowances, all the different things that go on, the mechanics of the project. So getting your CCPR is that next step to really understanding how these things have to come together and are implemented in use in a project. Thad, you've had to teach the class over the last few years. What do you think?
Well, and I'll share just a quick story, Casey. Thank you for that, because when I sat for my CCPR, I was looking for a study course and I could not find one. And so searching high and low across the country, there just wasn't enough demand. As Casey said, when he was president of CSI, they only had 44 people take it in a year. And so there just wasn't enough demand for chapters to feel like they wanted to do it. So I made up my mind when I passed it, I was going to do a virtual study course using our region GoToMeeting. Seems so silly. This was only 4 or 5 years ago, but it seems so long ago now with all this virtual stuff that we do. But we started out with 3 people in our first class. The second cycle, we had 7 people, and I had 18 people from 16 states in the last cycle before they pulled it off. And so when it comes back, I plan to go back to that particular system, and I will be doing a preparatory class for those of you that want to move to the next phase. We talked earlier, we had the little slide where it showed the future, and we showed the 2 little stick figures, one helping the other one up. I'm at the point in my career where I want to give back to those younger product reps, and I want to help the industry get better. A rising tide lifts all boats. And I will share one quick story with what happened to me after I got my CCPR. I was in downtown Chicago. I had an appointment with somebody who got called away to a job site. I left my business card at the front desk for the secretary or the receptionist to pass it on. When she took it back to the office, one of the principals was in there, and he looked at it and he said, "Tell him to hang on a minute." And this is somebody that I would have never asked for, because in a big office in Chicago, without an appointment, I wouldn't even think I could ever drop in and see anybody. But he came when I came around the corner, he was looking at my business card. He looked up and he looked at my business card, and he looked up and he goes, "I had to see you." And I said, "I beg your pardon?" He goes, "I had to see you. I've never seen one of these." I said, "A business card?" And he said, "No, FCSI CCPR. I've never seen one of these. I just had to meet you." Now, obviously, he was heavily involved in CSI and understood that we need to do a better job of spreading the news outside the industry, outside of our circle, outside of our association. But That situation alone made me getting my CCPR worthwhile because I instantly had some credibility in his mind. There's about 30,000, 35,000 total CDTs. There's 133 CCPRs. So please, Casey and I will welcome you. Once it comes back online, come join the club. Come on in. The water's fine. So we've got, as we get closer to wrapping up here, we've got some things we'd like to share. When you're a golden rep, there are some things that we probably should kind of go over. I've never walked in an office without a business card. Have the information available. If somebody wants to talk to you, give them a way to get back to you. Have the right things in your hand when you go in. Know your product, know the code surrounding your product, and know the industry standards, and be willing to share all the competitors that you have, and which ones are good and which ones are bad, and which ones work and which ones don't, and where they're at. So compare your product with your competition and be honest about it. These are the things that people remember. People remember if you badmouth a product. People remember if you're nothing but a salesperson. People also remember if you're open and honest and you're willing to share information that they go, well, he didn't have to tell me that. He didn't have to tell me who the competitors were. Well, no, sir, I want to tell you the competitors that will give you the best opportunity to have an equal product. If I've done a good job of talking about my product and you like it and you think it makes sense, let me tell you the 2 or 3 in the space that are the most like mine, and let me share with you maybe the reasons that you'd want to specify them as well. Be prompt within reason. Follow up. 30 to 40% of the people that respond, the sales go to the call that responds first. And then something that's really important, a lot of times when you're working on a project, your clients are working on a project, they have some confidentiality agreements, and you need to be quiet about it. If that's something that they say, hey, this isn't widely known, or we're working on this, we've got an MOP, or MOU, we want to make sure that this doesn't get out into the marketplace. Don't go out and blab it to everybody else in the country. Casey?
I'll just take it from here. Admit your limitations. I think that's one of the most important points to understand is the limitations of the product. And a lot of people don't talk about those. And you really want to be careful making promises that you can't keep. Admit the product limitations when you can, and understand where recommending the right product works. Be willing to share others, even competitors that fill the need better. Earning that trust is really key. And never, ever, ever badmouth your competition. It just makes you look bad. Take the high road. Take the road that is really leading them to why your solution is best. I've oftentimes, and I think I saw it at my first CSI meeting in St. Louis, was one representative bad mouthing another one at a CSI meeting, and oh my gosh, was it sparks flying! I think the individual just doesn't understand how important that piece is. And I've had it happen. I've seen it happen, and I've had people ask me my thoughts about it, and I tell them, take the high road. Acknowledge the architect can only control so much. The architect doesn't buy a thing from you. However, they influence a lot of your success down the road. So be kind, be friendly, be supportive, but understand a lot of things are out of their control. Life cycle costs are important, but it's also important to understand the life cycle needed on the project. So if they're wanting to build this and flip it in 5 to 10 years, they might not need your 50-year design, right? So that's the important thing to understand with that comment. And the last one, but certainly not least, is stay involved in your local design community. Stay involved with CSI, the AIA, the BEC chapters, whatever you need to be involved with, the Roaring Hardware Institute. They're all important assets that can bring you to the table, help you learn what others have to share, help you know that you can help others when they need to talk about something that's not related to what you particularly support or serve or sell. So having that knowledge and that resource to go, hey, you need to call Joe. He's got this. That really helps. And that will earn you credibility down the road. And understanding the industry association you're in and how valuable those assets are are really key to helping you be a bigger participant in the industry. And last but not least, I do want to credit my good longtime friend, Paul Simonson, is the one that invented Golden Rep. I want to give him credit here. Bless his heart. He passed away last month, and he's going to be missed. So, Paul, this one's to you. My hat's off to you, buddy.
We've talked quite a bit here. We've got about 3 more slides, and we're getting close to the end of our time. So, Steve, I'll just throw it to you for a second. Is there any other questions or anything anybody would like to ask us as we start to wrap up here?
Not really getting any questions, guys. Have a couple comments, though. Mitch Miller says, you guys rock as always. And Russ Thompson said, Thad is one of the most knowledgeable guys in the business. He is a trusted advisor.
Tell him I'll be happy to send his check in the mail tomorrow. Thank you.
All right. You have a fan club.
No, I think this one gets back to your listen with the intent to listen. Dr. Phil says, God gave you 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. Use them proportionally. This was actually Phil McDade who shared this one at a region conference, but I think it's more appropriate for a lot of sales reps out there. We have the tendency to be extroverts. We want to talk. We want to talk. We don't necessarily take the time to listen. So I can't emphasize that point enough.
You know, just some common traits, you know, as we start to wrap up here, just some common traits of people that are trusted advisors. And as we've talked, Casey and I have talked over the years, and we've got a lot of friends. You know, we heard Mitch Miller. I love Mitch. Product track ran the academies with all the different tracks for several years. Fantastic person. Thanks for being here, Mitch. We heard Alan's name earlier, Alan Itzowitz, one of my trusted architects. And I would tell you that goes both ways. There's times that I call architects and say, hey, I've got a question about this, or I'm not sure which direction I need to go with this. So understand that part of being a good trusted advisor is to check your premises. If things aren't going well with a project, or things aren't going well with somebody, like I said earlier, there's times where I just didn't have a good connection with people, and I was willing to stand up and say, hey, you know what? I'm not happy with the way this is going. I'll tell you what, it seems like you're busy. It doesn't seem like this is working for either one of us. I'll be happy to come back. Again, you can't believe the amount of goodwill that will give if somebody's having a bad day, or they've got 2 other projects on their mind, and I gave this guy some time. I'm going to be here, but I'm really not listening. So check your premises, understand what's going on, listen with the intent to listen, overpromise and underpromise and overdeliver. Attack your top 5 problems. And I give a whole seminar on this, but quickly what I'll say is everybody has a certain set of problems that happen on a regular basis. Think about driving to work. We haven't done that for a while, but soon some of us will be doing it again. All of us will be one of these days. If you go the same way every day and you run into the same red light, or you follow the same slow car, or you have the same construction problem, it probably makes sense for it to the first time it happens, it's inconvenient. The second time it happens, you're not happy about it. The third time it happens and you're aggravated about it, write it down and say, maybe I should choose another way to go tomorrow. You know, so if we're always working on our top 5 problems, we'll always be better than we were yesterday. Get certified, mentor your peers. One of the reasons Casey and I spend the time putting these programs together, and we spend the time doing these things, is because we want to help the next generation. We want to give them an opportunity to have less problems than we did. We want to give them the opportunity to learn from us. And by the same token, like Casey talked about earlier, we're learning from you the same way. So I learn just as much from the people that I teach or I interact with. They teach me as much as I teach them. That's one of the beautiful things about instruction. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about doing what I'm doing, is helping the next generation. And my dad had a saying, and it's the last one here: leave it better than you found it. No matter what I do, no matter where I'm at, I want to leave that position better than I found it. That makes me a trusted advisor. If I have interaction with an architect and I help them in ways they didn't even know that they needed, they're going to remember me fondly the next time. My wife is my lifelong partner, and I love her to death, and we bounce a lot of things off of each other. And there's times where she gets frustrated with me because I will go out of my way to help somebody maybe that she thinks doesn't deserve it, or maybe she thinks that it's less inconvenient. But she says, what I've learned about you is if you were the trash man, you'd want to be the best trash man on the block. And I've told her, I said, I might not want to be number 1, but number 1 and number 2 better know who I am. So always make sure you remember to leave it better than you found it.
It's all about people management, and it really is about finding how to motivate others, to train others, to empower others, to educate others, to reward and attract others. This is really key when it comes to managing people. It's key in managing relationships, and it's key in making a successful impact into the industry. I think this is a great slide, and it gets right back to that point of we're here to help the industry. Uh, at I I used to kid Ross Morey a lot about calling me vendor. Uh, the term vendor really turns me off. It's like your wife's reference to the trash man. If somebody's going to call me vendor, though, by golly, I'm going to be the best vendor I can possibly be. So that's the way I look at it, and I'm here to help.
Guys, thank you very much. It was a great presentation. A lot of comments saying, well done. Thank you very much. Great presentation. So,
well, thank you for having us in. It's been an honor to present.
Yep. Thank you.
Absolutely agree. You're welcome.
There are no other questions. So with that, we will wrap this up. I want to thank you all for attending. Thanks again, gentlemen. Appreciate it very much. You guys are great.
Have a great weekend.